Today on Circle Live, we're with Marya Nguyen of Yangu Web Studio. We'll be talking about daily routines, finding your why, and how to deal with vampire clients. On a recent blog post on the Circle blog, you talked about how your day as a designer starts at 6:30 a.m. and ends with a final walk of your dog Jet at 10:30 p.m. But you also revealed that it wasn't always this way. How did you figure out your schedule, and what were some of the hard lessons that brought you to having that much of a regimented schedule?
I know today we're talking about anti-hustle, but I think a lot of me finding my way there has been in the hustle. I'm not opposed to hustling. I think that when you're starting out, there has to be a level of sacrifice, right, in the time that you have with your friends and family, especially if you don't have a backup, right? Like I have to make this work. There's no going back to parents' house or anything like that. And so a lot of that looks like me burning out and realizing that I needed something else.
What do you think was the tipping point for you? Was it a particular project you were working on that you said, no, this one needs to be different?
During that quarter, I had signed on to a mentorship for that quarter, and it was the hardest that I had ever worked. Like, I was doing my day shift or the normal hours, and then I'd eat dinner, I'd get cleaned up, and then I'd work again, basically until I went to bed. And the point that I hit was just realizing that, like, I woke up the next day and I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, I don't even know who this person is. Like, her face looks different than from what I remember. I couldn't even remember the last time I actually looked at myself, you know?
It sounds like at some point you realized that this day-to-day rhythm that you had for yourself of get up, work really hard, only break when you have to, clearly you were doing that because you thought that there was going to be some return on investment for that.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that moment of awakening where you're like, wait, the thing that I think I'm working towards, I'm not sure I want anymore, would have been humbling, jarring, scary.
I recognized that after multiple cycles of burnout, right, that when I was able to step back, I saw that there is a level of, I want to say success in that, where you have your head down and you work hard and it's day in, day out, and you're making this exponential progress, right? But I think that it needs to have a container. It needs to have a time frame, right? Because what I didn't realize back then was, I just got lost in the doing, the projects and all of that. And it took me out of my why. Why did I decide to do this in the first place? What value does it provide for me if my body is breaking down, if I haven't checked in with the people I love and who are supporting me from afar, but are also kind of she's probably busy, you know? And it's I did this so that I could have time and space with them. And so it is jarring when you realize I've just been lost in it.
Do you think that your why evolved at all, or just the way that you thought that you could get to it?
So when I first started, my why for me was to have time and space for friends, family, people I love, for the things that I want to do. And I don't think that the why has changed, but my belief in that, how I could get there, changed. So from the start, it was okay, I need to work as hard as I can. I can't charge too much. I have to take every opportunity that I can get, right? And I think part of that was also hey, you're not deserving of this financial success unless you are having to prove that you're worth that.
I love this why. I love all this self-reflection that you're doing. I think that is something that it took me a long time to get to as well. I, like you, used to think, the only thing that matters is work. You got to work, and never stop. You don't take a break until you earn it. For me, it was, I'm so focused on what I'm doing that I don't have time to sit and self-reflect. The self-reflection, have you always been sort of a self-reflective person? You've always found ways to build that in? Or again, was that something that you reached a tipping point and you're like, I gotta look at myself in the mirror more?
When I was a kid, I did have a journal. I've always been an avid journaler, but back then it was like, oh, I have a crush on so-and-so and I had this for lunch today kind of thing. But I kept up with that practice, and I think mainly because it did help me process a lot of trauma and just like growing up in childhood and as an adult learning new things and stuff like that. But when I was in the thick of the hustle, like that fell to the wayside. And I think that there was a part of me that knew like, hey, there is obviously something emotionally going on where I'm feeling discomfort in the hustle every day, but I'm also knowing that I'm not choosing to make time for it. And so I think eventually it did have to come back to like, I have a moment now, I'm just going to scribble down whatever I can like have in my head and not have an additional layer of pressure of like, I have to journal about what I'm processing right now or like what I'm going through. I think it's that permission to just be, because I think also when you're in the hustle, you lose sight of being present as well, because you're so caught up in the work that it's like you said, I'm only going to take a break when like I really have to go or something like that during the day.
As you now have like kind of moved into new rhythms, how have you intentionally structured in time to be creative, or how have you structured your day to allow you to be the most creative?
So then that goes back to the routine part for me. So what the routine looks like is I knew that I wanted to have some form of exercise. I'm not a huge, like, I want to work out and get ripped and have like, like bench 200 pounds or something like that. I knew that I just wanted to move my body. I wanted to feel grounded in it. And I knew that I wanted to eat real food because for a moment in time there, I was just like microwaving any meal that I could to make it fast and convenient. And then when we also adopted our dog Jet, I was like, I want to spend time with him because he didn't choose to be here. I chose him. And so it looked like, here's my schedule. And when it comes to the creativity part, that's where it does still get challenging today, I would say, because the routine helps you figure out the structure for what needs to get done, but sometimes the intentional creativity or the intentional pause or the decompression, like you have to make it it's your responsibility to keep yourself interested in things. And so finding that creativity for me looks like these days decompression after the workday. And so dinner time's done and now I'm playing my Nintendo Switch and playing just cozy games and stuff, or snuggling on the couch with Jet and him napping.
For all the routine that you have, I want to ask the other side of things. Do you still sometimes find yourself in chaos? And how do you get out of that? Or maybe you need a little chaos sometimes.
When I start my weeks on Sundays, I do a prep and plan. And what that looks like is I open up my Notion, I look at my agenda, I look at where all my client projects are and things like that, and I plan out my week. And as the week goes, as you know, things just don't go as planned. And so I'm shifting tasks and moving things around and stuff like that. So I feel like by the time I hit Saturday night, there is some chaos reintroduced into the schedule because it just doesn't go as planned. And honestly, I'm okay with it. I think that a lot of the work we end up finding ourselves doing is uncertain, right? Like you just don't know how things are going to turn out. And for me personally, I think that with enough repetition of doing this, I've become more okay with that chaos.
I love that. Do you find that you're most often at home working? Do you go out to work? I know a lot of people, I think that tune into Circle Live that are designers in our community are, whether this is like a part-time job and they're trying to like squeezing it in, or this has become their full-time thing, like working alone can be like maybe daunting. I'm curious how you've like kind of balanced that in maybe outside of your social time.
I'm definitely that one person sitting in the cafe every single day for like 4 hours. I'm lucky because the cafe that I go to is in a hotel, so there's a lot of transient, like there's a lot of movement and things like that. I've gotten to know the staff, and I'm definitely the type of person that needs to get out of the house, because if not, I will be in one spot all day. And before I had Jet and before I introduced working out, I'm pretty sure I took like 100 steps a day. Like, I also think that if you're not able to readily go somewhere different, like a cafe, I think it's also really important to connect with community online. And I have a handful of groups that I'm tapped into every day. And it's just really nice to know, whether it is like a co-working hour together, that there's somebody who's out there doing something that you're doing too.
If you can't readily leave as well, I have found that like even just sitting in like a slightly different place in my apartment can like kind of like rock my world. Or like, this is maybe too much information, but like sleeping on the other side of the bed than the one side that I usually sleep on, I'm like, whoa, a whole new bedroom. And so I feel like there's little ways that you could like disrupt your like mental kind of rhythms that I kind of like feel like, for me, make me feel more alive in a way. Like little things like I always hold my umbrella with this hand, but then one day it's raining and I hold it with my left hand. I'm like, wow, was that an option always available? I feel like kind of like inspire the creativity.
Same way for me too. Most of the time when I'm sitting at my desk, that's like work mode, but there's days when I don't feel as focused, and sitting on the couch is like, oh my gosh, I'm cozy.
You also mentioned in the blog that you would expect a younger designer, somebody who's newer to the process, to maybe face more work in the way of getting to this routine. What would you say to somebody who's just starting out and sort of facing these struggles? Is it, how do you overcome that sort of initial grunt work to this paradise of routine?
The work that you're doing every single day in the grind, so to speak, in that grunt work and the like all work, no play part of the cycle, is that, one, this is temporary. Whether it looks like you're pushing for the next 6 months or year, it's not going to be that same level of push for the entire time for the rest of your life. So knowing that maybe you can even decide on how long you push for, that's one thing. Another thing that I really had to come to terms with was that stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think that when I was in the thick of it and I was really feeling guilty about not really taking care of myself as best as I could, it just made me feel like I was doing something wrong, or that I was in the wrong. But in reality, I was stressed because I felt like I didn't have time for these things. But it's also like my stress is an indicator that there are other things I value. And so keeping that in mind is also good as well, because it will motivate you to know that you're not doing anything wrong, that you're trying to figure things out, and that this is going to culminate in some extent, so that you're not just hustling for the rest of your life.
We're going to move into talking about vampire clients, which, clients that suck the life out of you. Maybe they're not good at adhering to boundaries. Maybe they call you at night. How do you kind of deal with those kind of clients? What kind of boundaries do you set, or what kind of like rhythms and routines have you set up to preserve your own?
Even today, sometimes it's hard for me to catch the red flags, and I'm already working with them, and I'm like, oh, I should have, but I didn't. And so a lot of the times what that looks like for me is, let's say, for example, a client is giving me piecemeal feedback. We're like, okay, this is one round of review and revision. And instead of doing it in an entire, we're kind of going back and forth, like, hey, copy tweak here, image change here, and that kind of thing. That can definitely suck the life out of you, because you're like, all right, I'm ready to move on to the rest of the build. Like, those are small tweaks that we can take care of. And what that tells me, though, is also whether or not I need to question, is this client just being a bad client, acting poorly, or are they just uninformed? And I think that if we switch the lens to curious, we are more readily able to ask these questions and be like, you know what, maybe I actually didn't ask if this client's ever worked with a web designer before, and that could have been a great start of like, oh, this is the type of feedback that I'm anticipating from you that will be like helpful for our progress and things like that. And so what does that mean? That means that you can add that into your conversations. It means that you can make some kind of asset like a guide or, you know, detailing what you're looking for and things like that. And so having those assets readily available, being ready to have those conversations, but also recognizing that, like, okay, let's say, for example, a vampire client, they have been unsatisfied with the work that you've done, and now they're attacking your character. Now they're trying to make you feel bad and let you know that you upset them and that they've lost. Like, that's the type of stuff that you're like, oh, I messed up. Like, I'm in the wrong, right? So it's like, it elevates your sense of like, oh, I'm just an awful person. You know, I think when you're able to recognize when a client is trying to attack your character, you also need to recognize that you provide a level of value. You're a professional and you've communicated things. And I think that's when you kind of have to let water slide down your back of like, this is not about me as a person. This is some kind of breakdown either in communication or expectations that is just unrealistic.
That sounds really hard.
Heartbreaking. Yeah, heartbreaking. I hope that doesn't happen so much anymore. I hope that you've been able to cut those clients loose.
Actually, that happened to me this past month. And it's very interesting because it does make you feel bad, right? But then it also makes you feel like, I did the best I could. You're fighting me for $200. Like, I would rather refund you and like wash my hands and move on.
Going to the very beginning of the process, though, do you feel as if you've even gotten better in the initial client interview at, as you say, red flags, noticing what those red flags are? What are some of those red flags?
The common one I hear is, oh, I could have done this, but, you know, I just didn't have the time, and I just want a simple site.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I just want a simple site.
Yeah, I think that's probably like 90% of the time that's something that some people say, but it's not until we have the conversation of asking them questions that they're like, oh yeah, this is actually the functionality I need, or oh, my expectation of this, it's not as, I'm trying to show them that there's a process to things and it may not be as simple in their mind as they anticipate. And so if they're not willing to expand or follow me in that collaborative process, immediate red flag.
Totally. I think people, in my experience, want to appear easygoing in that initial conversation. But that often masks what the real problem is, which is that they lack a vision, which is fine if you lack a vision, but visions cost money and expertise, and also a lot of room to breathe. I have found, just in my limited experience with working with clients, that if somebody in the first client conversation is really quick to say, yeah, we're going to hire you, then that can be a red flag. It can mean not necessarily vampire client, but it's going to mean a lot more feedback later, at the very least.
I love this idea, though, of pairing the curiosity that you mentioned with some of these things. Like, okay, when you say simple, what does that mean to you?
Yeah,
that means X, Y, Z, and this is the associated but like what you're describing is an entire online store.
And I think that part of the approach that I've adopted is just asking like, hey, how can I help you? And take it as a doctor approach, because oftentimes, you know, if you're a patient, you go in, you tell them all your symptoms and kind of what's going on, and then you start talking about, okay, well, where is it happening, how often, and that kind of thing. So when a client comes to me and I ask them that, they typically start with the like, you know, I'm 3 to 5 years in now, and I just threw a site together when I first started. It was fine, but now I'm trying to attract more high-end clients, and my website just it's not aligned with where we're at right now. So I'm like, okay, great. So what about it? Have your services changed? Have they evolved? Are they more complex? How can we figure out a strategy so that when a client comes to you, maybe you do offer multiple services, but it doesn't feel like all part of a different puzzle, that they make sense together, and that whether your client wants to work with you long term and they can utilize you for multiple services, like those are all things that we kind of tend to expand on, but it starts with the blank slate there, if you will.
You frame your work around client transformation and like the why behind everything. Why do you think that mindset shift is necessary for designers who want to charge more than just a simple rate?
When I first started out, say for example, I knew that I could create websites for people. And so I reached out to my network and I was like, hey, is anybody doing anything? And do they need a website for it, right? I can make it. And so that was kind of my approach of like, let me try to get as many portfolio projects as I can to build. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that when you as a client have a problem that needs to be solved, it doesn't come from, I need a website that has animations on my photos and that I can click through tabs on one page. Like, that's the thought process of like, those are features of the website. And when you're talking to a client that has a problem to solve, they're not thinking about those features, they're thinking about their why, about how does their website solve a specific problem for their business, for their own audience, clients, whatever that is. And so as a designer, our work really is to uncover what that is and how the strategy of the site can support their why, and not necessarily that the end goal is just a website.
Okay, you need a website. Yeah, you want to like people. You want people to visit the website and like get your clients, but like we're gonna miss the plot, you know. Back to the blog post that recently got published on the Circle blog. You suggest documenting every conversation and problem solved. That seems like a lot of work, but it must have saved a project at some point. So tell us more about kind of the ethos behind that.
You know, what's funny is that it's actually not more work at all, because we're doing the work already. We're just adding one step to capture it. And so, say for example, something that I've started doing this quarter has been recording my inquiry calls, and I'm already taking them, so I just have to push a button to record it. And what that allows me to do is read through the transcripts and start to see a pattern of language, of needs, of wants. And so these people are coming to me for a specific need, and they're using very specific language that I normally wouldn't say, because I'm coming from maybe more technical or strategic standpoint. And so when we're able to capture the language that our clients are already using, that's a great tool for your marketing, for your sales, because now you've worked with clients. I think of it as a circle, right? All of our clients are at some different point on that circle. And I pulled that insight from one of my mentors. But it's our job to be able to name that language so that that client can recognize, oh, they know what I'm going through right now. In fact, they've already solved it for someone. So I'm curious to see if they have anything else. And that just change in language and something I'm already capturing can be super helpful for someone else to come find me better, sooner, faster, whatever it may be.
I imagine you have a bunch of different circles that you're thinking about. You know, have you whittled it down to a series of categories of businesses that you tend to niche down into, or how do you think about those different circles?
I'm in the process of doing that, even after 5+ years. Just recognizing that there are certain types of clients I do enjoy working with, that enjoy the creative process. I am starting to capture, again, what are those common needs that those specific clients tend to need, right? So it usually is kind of an industry niche circle. So say, for example, architecture firms, they always love a portfolio site, and those sites are going to be same in essence for every architecture firm. They're going to need their portfolio page, they might need a project page, they're going to need to share their services and what makes them different. And so I'm starting to wrap my mind around what those packages look like, and then I'm starting to think about how my marketing can feed back to those specific pages for them. And then it makes it easier as a designer to approach a client and be like, I have the perfect solution that you're looking for, and I don't have to spend my time remaking a custom package for you.
So the documentation that you're doing feeds the marketing and sales that you're doing. And you find that this is just a natural process. How has that changed, though? Was that something that just kind of developed naturally, or at some point were you like, my sales aren't that great right now, maybe I need better marketing, what can I do? Or it also sounds like you've had some really good mentors.
Yeah, I credit everything to my mentors and community, like peers. I would not be where I am today without them. And this is something that I'm building real time, right? I've been very lucky in my business in that I haven't had to market quite at all. And so it's been really that shift in my desire for where I want to align myself and the work that I want to do and the clients I want to continue to work with. And that's asked of me to make a more concerted effort for that marketing so that I can position myself to be in part of the conversations that they're having.
But I know that you mentioned a desire to create resources and lead magnets for both clients and designers. How do you think about what kind of content is worth creating versus might just be noise?
I feel like a good gut check would be, would I have benefited from this at some point? Like a simple checklist, like if I'm offboarding a client, what would have been something that I could have just referenced and been like, okay, yeah, I'm going through all these things, this is perfect. So I would approach it from there first, in that, like, if I'm creating this asset, will past Marya have benefited from it? And even thinking about common things that I'm noticing I'm remaking every time I'm doing something, and it's just like, can I make that for future Marya then, so that she doesn't have to keep spending admin time to do whatever it is.
So you mentioned you journal a lot. Do you have any journaling tips? Do you bullet journal? Do you use software? What's your journaling style?
I gotta have a dedicated journal. So I have multiple journals, and I have a daily journal for work where I sketch out ideas and stuff like that, take notes. And then I have a journaling journal, and that's usually, I try to make it appealing, whether that is a fun cover that I can swap out or things like that, or have like a really nice pen. Love that. I enjoy dotted grid journal, so there's some structure. I hate lines. I don't know what it is about that.
Since Jet is such a central part of your daily schedule, does he have an official title at your company?
Oh no, I actually, I haven't even thought of that.
Title,
Yeah.
Intern?
Best boy.
I'll have to revise my website to include him, because he's literally at my feet under my desk like most of the day.
Nintendo Switch. You play Nintendo Switch. Do you have one game you go to, or would you be able to name your top 5 favorite games?
I don't think I even have 5 games. I'll give you context. So when I was a kid, I had a Game Boy Advance SP, and it was one of those limited ones that had the tattoo on them. And then my dad even engraved my name in it, and it was like my prized possession. I played Pokemon, I played Zelda, I played Mario, like I had all of my favorites. And then I didn't play games for like decades. And I literally bought my Switch when I was a full-grown adult, like maybe a few years ago, and I picked up Zelda Breath of the Wild, and it kicked my ass. It kicked my butt, like for real, because I was like, this is hard. And it's like, I can go anywhere in the world, this world, and I'm like
forever. Like, it will take up all, talk about vampire clients, it will take up all of your time.
I'm like going into random spots where like they're like way more difficult than I have the ability to fight. I'm like, why am I able to go through here? Like, I can't. But currently I've been playing, I think it's called Cozy Grove. It's kind of like a spin-off of Animal Crossing, and it's super fun because it's like spirits, and you're helping spirit bears like remember their memories on the island and stuff like that.
Does that have any connection at all to your work, or does it feel like completely separate?
It's totally separate, and I love it. Yeah.
What's you go to a coffee shop every day? What's your coffee shop order?
Oh, depends on the mood and depends what they have. I'm particular about my oat milk. I don't know if you guys are. I just feel like when it's a bad oat milk, it just changes the whole flavor of the drink. And so if they have bad oat milk, I'll do an Americano. If I'm feeling it, I'll do a matcha.
I've tried to get on board with oat milk, but it just tastes like oatmeal. People can come for me, but it does.
Marya Nguyen, Yangu Web Studio, thank you for joining us on Circle Live. It's so great to have you.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
We'll see you guys later.